If you're brand new to Warhammer 40K, then you're probably still not over just how crazy and over the top some of the forces in the Imperium can be. We've got genetically engineered superhuman space marines deployed in metal boxes that fall from literal space right into the enemy lines, massive soul-linked apocalypse robots that shoot crackling suns at each other, and an organization of such secretive and powerful agents that if they so decide it is necessary, they will nuke an entire planet on a whim. But even with all these crazy, powerful factions, there is one evil that even all of these forces combined cannot stop. This evil comes from within humanity, from within ourselves, a broken genetic lineage, an awful truth. We call them Psykers, humans that are more than just a person. They connect to the warp and blast out powers of change and destruction unimaginable to our mere mortal minds, wreaking havoc upon the worlds of mankind and have already once nearly ended the dominion of humanity over the stars. So, in his infinite wisdom, before he was interred onto the golden throne, the God Emperor of mankind, beloved by all, tried to find a solution to this problem. Massive black ships started appearing all over the Imperium, a sisterhood of pariahs that made populations panic at just their mere sight, and a dark price that now had to be paid. A price not seen before, a tide that stole away the witches, sorcerers and psykers from every world across the Imperium. But what are these black ships? Where did they originate from? Why are they the chosen carriers of the Imperium's most dangerous payloads? If the Emperor put them in place, why did they call it a forbidden protocol? If the Imperium is transporting millions of Psykers every day, where do they go? What do they do with them? And who are those Sisters of Silence that patrol these ships? Do they really have black hole anti-warp energy souls that make people go absolutely insane? Or is there something more to this sisterhood? A darker purpose? Well, in this video, we are going to explore every single detail about the black ships and their deadly Psyker payloads. We will cover what they exactly are, their surprisingly long history from before even the Great Crusade, and end off with multiple excerpts on what it is like to be captured by one of these ships, what the conditions are like in one of their dark prison halls, and get a glimpse at what it's like to be directly fed into the Astronomicon itself, or even put in the Golden Throne as a sacrifice to the Emperor himself. This video was a lot more work than I expected. The lore of these black ships is spread across a dozen novels, books, compendiums and White Dwarf articles. I even realized that most people I've seen talk about them, and heck, part of the Lexicanum, just straight up got their lore wrong. We will cover all that and a whole lot more in this video. Please give the video a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more 40k content. Alright, let's get into the lore. The League of Black Ships is the second largest fleet in the entire galaxy, only outnumbered by the Imperial Navy, who fights the endless wars of the Imperium. But what exactly are these black ships? And why do they have so many? At their core, the black ships are the tools of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, and with them they patrol the Imperium. They are the dark daggers that cuts every world, extracting individuals cursed by the genetic Psyker spiral code, or those condemned to live as witches in an Imperium that has no care for human life. These ships serve as massive prison-like transports, ferrying thousands upon thousands of terrified Psykers and witches to the heart of the Imperium. Once they reach Holy Terra, they will be split into groups and each will be thoroughly tested. Those young and strong enough to serve may find their way into the Schola Psychana, but for most, a much darker fate is chosen. If their body or mind is too weak to control their powers, they will be fed into the Imperial Palace, where at some point in the next few weeks, they will be sacrificed to the Astronomicon and the Golden Throne. Black ships hold perhaps the most important duty in the entire Imperium, to supply the fuel, which in turn powers the Astronomicon, which acts as the lighthouse of the galaxy. If you didn't know, in the Warhammer 40k universe, there are two opposed realities. One is the physical realm we live in, the other is the Immaterium, usually referred to as the Warp. The Warp, Immaterium or Sea of Souls, is the emotional reflection of our reality. It is a realm of energy swirling, a deep sea of monsters and ancient gods that make it their domain. This is the dimension the Imperium has to travel through to quickly traverse the galaxy. In essence, they literally travel through hell and back. The Astronomicon emits a light from a localized warp storm within the Imperial Palace on Terra, which, when traveling through the warp, navigators can use as a guide to estimate where they are in this hellish dimension, giving them a tether through the madness, and properly navigating the galaxy at a pace much greater than that of light speed. But to pilot and service these ships that hold one of the most dangerous payloads in the entire galaxy, the Imperium has created two dedicated kinds of crews to take care of any possible problems. The first are the indentured servants who come from a select few worlds that are otherwise exempt from paying tithes to the Imperium. Although expendable, these crewmen are tested and scrutinized for any psychic abilities, and in turn are often mind-scrubbed to prevent any taint. The captains of these ships are handpicked from the highest ranking adepts of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, while navigators are exclusively drawn from the Granicus, Ptolemy and Macpherson navigator houses, chosen for their high purity and long history of warding off chaos corruption in their members. On some ships, other forces such as inquisitorial stormtroopers, guard regiments and arbites may be deployed to further secure their payload, but generally it is done by the absolutely terrifying second group of crew members. That second group consists of the Sisters of Silence, an ancient sisterhood that originally served directly under the Emperor of Mankind during the Great Crusade, as part of the talents of the Emperor alongside the Adeptus Custodes. Each Sister of Silence is chosen from those afflicted with the pariah gene. But before I explain that, we need to understand a little bit more about the psychogenetic spiral code and the blank/pariah skill. Every single living creature has a connection to the warp, which we refer to as a soul. Some have a stronger connection, allowing them to manipulate these warp energies and project them into the physical realm. These people are known as Psykers. Now, the opposite also happens. Instead of a connection to the warp, there is a black hole instead. These people are known as blanks or pariahs. This absence of a warp connection creates a negative imprint on the warp wherever this being passes. There is a whole spectrum of how strong these connections can be in both directions. We have delta, gamma, beta and alpha psykers at the top, and chi, psi and omega pariahs at the bottom. Most people are within the range of rho and pi, but as powers grow, rankings may change. Simply being in the presence of a pariah, a living creature's connection to the warp, can be drastically weakened or even completely severed. Suddenly being cut off from your soul is a rather traumatic experience, causing feelings like fear, paranoia, panic, nausea, or even death in unlucky cases. On Psykers, the effects of these null fields are even more intense. Sisters of Silence fall right at the omega side of the scale, which means that when they are near a Psyker, they can suppress their powers completely, essentially wiping their connection with the warp until the Psykers are safely delivered to Terra. But we will dive a bit deeper into them later in this video. Besides these two main crew types, certain officials across the Imperium can be found on black ships as well. These are generally inquisitorial agents who have secured rites of passage. These inquisitors often travel aboard these vessels, looking for particularly powerful Psykers to be used for their own ends, adding them to their retinues or collecting them for some kind of ritual or defense mechanism. Life aboard the black ships is bleak and dangerous for all. Even the Sisters of Silence and the militant arms of the black ships are not truly safe from the dangers of traveling through the warp with so many psychic souls on board. Yet no matter if they are pariah, adapt or serve, the crews of the black ships are the lifeblood of the Emperor, and without them, the Astronomicon would blink out within a day. Yet, where did these black ships originally come from? What is it like to be on one? And just how important are they really for the Emperor and his Imperium? Let's have a look at their history to find out. Before the Great Crusade expanded beyond the Sol system, the Emperor would have the Astronomicon built, as well as creating an organization known as the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. With this beacon to guide ships and an order of Psykers to communicate across the stars, the Imperium was ready to begin the Great Crusade in full force. But the Emperor knew every danger and useful aspect of the Psyker and prepared accordingly. He created the Great Tide, which took its first harvest during the Unification Wars. This tide was to collect every Psyker across the Imperium and put them to work or remove them as a threat. As new worlds joined the Imperium, the League of Black Ships grew in accordance. In these early days, the Great Tide was enforced by Primaris Psykers loyal to the Emperor, who created the then militant arm out of regular human soldiers to aid in enforcing the Great Tide. Yet even with a small army, the aid of Psykers and good equipment, this early version of the Divisio Investigatus was always on the back foot. Their task was Herculean and only grew more impossible as the Imperium started encompassing thousands of worlds. Their list of failures grew every year, and many options were considered to deal with the growing Psyker problem. But disaster struck once the cataclysm of Pentasanius unfolded, shocking the Black Ships and Divisio Investigatus to the core. Pentasanius was a frontier world only valued for its massive population. This world would slowly rot from the inside as its population eagerly joined the growing armies of the Emperor. Vice and petty corruption were rampant, followed by dark beliefs and doomsday cults. Yet one of these cults, the Final Banquet as they called themselves, worked supposed miracles. This caused the cult to attract the attention of the Black Ships. Half a dozen vessels arrived carrying a small army of enforcers. The cult was to be apprehended as rogue Psykers. Most of the ships sent out and their crews were never heard from again, and the entire system gave into madness shortly after. Bloodshed and violence unwound like wildfire, and it was clear a psychic force of immense power had been unleashed within the population centers. 1 in 4 people in the Distempora sector became mutated monsters, and Imperial army units all across the sector were mobilized. The planetary governor of Pentasanius was shot down by his own bodyguards when he tried to devour his own children, and Imperial army units turned on each other en masse. Captain Gigandantes, who led the Black Ships, was left to oversee the situation, and he resorted to calling in the 6th Legionis Astartes. But the yet-to-be-named Spacels were still transiting from Terra, and would take days to arrive. Not even targeted orbital bombardment could turn the tides of chaos. Somehow, a single Imperial army formation held the line, which after some investigations, ended up being the Daughters of the Crow, a regiment of indentured irregulars. They were a primarily female and techno-barbarian force who had come from an ancient feral planet. Those who worked alongside the Daughters of the Crow complained about them. They antagonized those around them. Soldiers experienced headaches even looking at them. It was as if they were tainted by something evil, and they often needed to be broken up by discipline masters during fights with other regiments. Yet this singular small regiment not only held back the psychic onslaught, but even drove it back. Not a single one of them had suffered from psychic contamination. They had stayed pure to the core. Captain Gigan knew immediately what they were, and it astounded him how an entire regiment of pariahs had formed. Gigan provided the Daughters of the Crow with air support. He would give them new weapons and armor to fight with, and ordered them directly to fight the cult that had started this madness. The Daughters cut down abominations and witches with such efficiency that there was a psychic backlash when the last cultist had fallen. Millions died in moments, but the wave of anarchy had ended. The rest of the sector was pacified by the 6th Legion mere weeks later. It had resulted in a destroyed world and 1 billion casualties. Yet the Black Ships had found their perfect witch hunters. The homeworld of the Daughters would quickly be visited by scores of the Black Ships, and they left the world half emptied. It is the belief of many that the Daughters of the Crow would become the Sisters of Silence. Some even believe the cataclysm of Pentasanius was a setup to test these warriors, but that truth will sadly never be known. What is known for a fact is that after 40 years, the Great Crusade would be fully aided by the Sisters of Silence. The Great Tide now included psychic blanks to be turned into more sisters. And with this inclusion of new warriors to the ranks, the Divisio Investigatus quickly expanded its operations. Of course, the history of Black Ships and the Sisters of Silence does not end with the Great Crusade. The fate of the Psykers brought to Terra by the Black Ships changed as the Imperium evolved in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy. The number of ships dedicated to the League and the worlds they titled would only continue to grow as the grim darkness of the far future continued. The Emperor would be fed 1,000 Psykers every single day from the cargo delivered to Terra, and with the founding of the Inquisition, they would play a larger and larger role in the Black Ships, especially so with the tragic fate of the Sisters of Silence. As for the fate of the Sisters of Silence, their exile and return to the talons of the Emperor will have to be a story for another day. It is time to get back to the Black Ships. Actually, to start out, why are they called Black Ships? Where did that name even originate from? Well, the Flight of the Eisenstein gives us a bit more detail on this, and provides us with a clear view of how the crafts actually look. Area Gloris, I do not know that vessel. Is that part of our flotilla? A smile crossed Kendall's lips, and she signed to the novice. "No, Captain, it is part of mine. See for yourself." The woman pointed out of the glass dome, and Garrow followed her direction. A piece of the void moved slowly across the prow of Endurance, passing between the bow of the warship and the distant glow of the Eotan sun. Whereas conventional vessels of the Imperial fleets ran with pennants and signal lamps to illuminate the lengths of their hulls, this new arrival, the Area Gloris, came in darkness, arriving out of the interstellar depths as an ocean predator might slip to the surface of a nighttime sea. Garrow had never laid eyes on a black ship before. These were the mothercraft of the Silent Sisterhood, carrying them back and forth across the galactic disk on the Emperor's witch-hunting missions. It was hard to make out anything more than just some basic detail of the ship's design. Framed against the solar glow of Iota, the battlecruiser was at least a match in size for the Imperials. The battlecruiser was at least a match in size for the Death Guard capital ship Indomitable Will. It lacked the traditional plow-blade prow of most Imperial vessels, ending instead in a blunt bow. A single knife-edged sail hung below the stern, and on it was an aquila cut from shimmering volcanic glass. Where Endurance and the ships of the Astartes flotilla were swords against the enemies of Terra, Area Gloris was a hammer of witches. "Impressive," rumbled Garrow. There was little else he could say. He found himself wondering what it would be like to wander the decks of that vessel, at once attracted and repelled by the idea of what secrets that craft must hide. Before we continue, I need to bring up a lore inconsistency that has been confusing the community for decades. We know of the black ships, but there are also inquisitorial black ships. What are those all about? The ships used by the Astra Telepathica are, unsurprisingly, not the only black ships in the Imperium. Commissioned by the Grand Masters of the Inquisition and constructed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, inquisitorial black ships might seem the same as the ones used by the League, but they are far from it and fulfill a completely different role. The Inquisition commissioned these secret warships to prevent a strong reliance on the Imperial Navy or Space Marines to support and aid inquisitorial efforts. A midway point between a Space Marine strike cruiser and a full-size battlecruiser, inquisitorial black ships earned their name through their dark deeds alone. Serving alone or with other Imperial forces, even one of these vessels is an intimidating sight and rarely welcomed by the Imperial Navy. It is also rumored that several Space Marine chapters have requested similar ships from Mars, only to be refused so far. So yeah, Inquisitors can have black ships as well, but those will not be the same as those used by the League of Black Ships that transport the Psykers of the Imperium. Now that we have covered their history, let's have a closer look at how they go about their tasks. What exactly is it that the black ships do during the collection of the Great Tide, and what do they do with their payloads? Originally, the black ships fed fuel and manpower into the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Not only was the Imperium trying to harness its Psykers into countless astropaths, but it also regulated them across every world of the Imperium to keep control of their numbers and whereabouts. This seemingly incomprehensible task required hundreds of thousands of functionaries and technicians, billions of tons of raw materials to construct specialized facilities, and most significantly, an absolutely insane amount of Psyker lore and knowledge on a scale never before seen. While astropaths remained as the major focus of the Divisio over the millennia, within the Great Tide Shadow, scores of sub-organizations grew and started to expand as well, from administrational blocks, logistical formations, to even technocults and arcane academies. All of these sub-organizations were kept in absolute secrecy and tightly controlled, so the general population did not know of their existence and would not be worried about what they could entail. Most notable, however, was the Chambers of the Scholastica Psychana, an institution of bound and bonded Psykers who were deemed strong and stable enough to induct and train others of their kind into the Imperium service. Tragically, however, as with all things in the Imperium, the Horus Heresy would change this institution to its very core. Every day since the Horus Heresy, the black ships have traveled to and from Holy Terra, but the fate of their cargo has grown much darker. Many Psykers die en route to Terra, but those who survive are rigorously tested to work out their best use. Upon reaching the Imperial homeworld, the Psykers are sorted, graded, and assigned to various duties. The vast majority are sent to the Astronomicon to serve the Great Beacon. Their lives are short, painful, and culminate in an agonizing death. The Astronomicon requires 10,000 Psykers to help fuel the beacon, but with their high mortality rate, they need to be replaced regularly. these Psykers pay a great price for their continued existence, but their sacrifice pales in comparison to that of others. Alongside the continual cost of the Astronomicon, the master of mankind himself requires the sacrifice of 1,000 souls every day to continue his existence. The Emperor is the carrion lord of the Imperium, and just as he continues to ensure the existence of the Imperium, so must the Imperium ensure his. So the task of the Black Ships has transcended the safety of the Imperium during the Great Crusade to becoming the sole reason it still stands. The Psykers fed into the Golden Throne not only keep him alive, but also ensure his psychic focus remains stable enough to keep focus the Astronomicon into a proper and usable way. This practice, funnily enough, partially began before the Emperor was interred upon the Golden Throne. When Magnus destroyed the seals protecting the Webway project, Terra would face its greatest war that none would remember. Without the Golden Throne and the Emperor, humanity's cradle would have been lost to the warp forever, but this was not the only threat. Through the heroic sacrifice of the 10,000 Adeptus Custodes, thousands of Sisters of Silence, and the most loyal of Mechanicum allies, Terra was defended against an endless flood of demons. Although the forces within the Webway were mighty and arguably could have won the Horus Heresy before it ever reached Terra, the same could not be said for the war in the Webway. In this sunless realm, the Imperium fought a war in the dark. They needed their Emperor to join them. Ordered by the Emperor, the Sisters of Silence enacted the Unspoken Sanction, which saw the first 1,000 Psykers sacrificed to the Golden Throne. While these first sacrifices were not used to keep the Emperor alive, as he, well, was still very much alive back then, it did allow him to leave the Golden Throne without Terra being drowned by the warp. The Emperor would personally see the war in the Webway ended, yet it was a brutally Pyrrhic victory. Later during the Siege of Terra, Malcador II would need the sacrifice of captured Psykers to keep the Golden Throne working just a little longer. While the sacrifices brought by the Black Ships for the continued existence of the Imperium are perhaps the most bleak of them all, not everyone they bring to Terra is fated to be used as fuel. Those Psykers who are stable enough to not be killed or turned into servitors end up serving the Imperium through a variety of means. Some are taken in by the Black Obsidian Palace of the Astra Telepathica, their fates unknown. Very few may actually serve their Imperium, with the majority of them becoming the previously mentioned astropaths. To become one of those, however, they must undergo soul binding beneath the Imperial Palace, which, if it does not kill the Psyker, almost always blinds them and leaves them physically fragile. But the Imperium uses more types of Psykers. 1 in 10 million is assigned to be a sanctioned Psyker for the Imperial Guard. 1 in 100 million is given over to become a Space Marine Librarian. And only 1 in a billion may serve the Inquisition or other high status officials. To most of the Imperium's everyday people, there is very little difference between a blank and a Psyker, and since the earliest days of the Black Ships, both are handed over. Every blank taken by the Black Ships will be put to work. The majority end up joining the Sisters of Silence or becoming Soul Guardians of the Imperial Palace. A select few, however, some of the most powerful amongst them, are taken to the Culexus Assassin Temple to become a monster blank that makes even Eldar Farseers shake in their boots. Go watch my video about that if you haven't already. So that is their task, to bring fuel to the Astronomicon, Golden Throne and the various Psyker houses to be converted into functional parts of this greater Imperium. But now let's take a look at what it is like to be taken by one of these ships. What it is like, well, to be in one. Generally, a black ship is a dreadful environment for Psykers. Physically sensitive crew spend most of their time in the shielded upper decks of the main bridge, as far removed from the containment holds as possible, so as to avoid the unpleasant effects of the security measures in place. There are numerous devices and routines directed at the great holds to confuse and confound psychic abilities. Each ship has a troop of specially trained adepts whose sole function is to focus their own psychic energies into an occluding sphere. This strange metaphysical device broadcasts an invasive signal into the minds of any nearby Psyker, severely disrupting their ability to concentrate or reason, and therefore largely curtailing their ability to utilize their talents. This device is but the highlight of the various psychic dampening tools used by the black ships. But that is not all. As seen in the Stuff of Nightmares, being a Psyker in a black ship's hold is absolutely and purposefully miserable. When Neri closed her eyes, she saw them, the masses at the borders of her dreams, scratching to get in. Neri woke up with a start, again. Relief flooded through her for a second, then she remembered where she was. Manacles held her wrists and ankles. Heavy chains bound her to an iron ring sunk into a bulkhead behind her. She couldn't lie down, only sag into a half crouch. And even then, not for long before her legs and shoulders ached. Neri blinked as harsh light strobed across her face. She winced as a discordant screech drilled into her nerves. Her face was itchy with sweat. She felt she had only slept for a minute or two, her temples throbbed with tiredness. There were creatures here too, in the waking world, lurking between the stabbing lights. Neri had seen enough of them to know what they were. They were mutants, not as terrible as the other creatures perhaps, but she feared them nevertheless. Some were disgustingly misshapen, others kept their corruption a secret, held deep inside themselves. They were creatures, just like her, and the chains, and the lights, and the terrible noises were meant to subdue them and her. She had woken from one nightmare into another. Please, you have to let me speak to someone. Neri begged as 6 hunchbacked, grey-faced servitors moved among the mutants. They wheeled a rusted tank between them, hosing the floor with grey nutrient slop. Neri reached out to them, but the chains brought her hands up short. I've done nothing wrong. I don't deserve to be here. A servitor turned its head towards her. Its augmatic eyes clicked and whirred. Its iris widened in appraisal of her, but it showed no expression. And there are creatures out there. They're almost through. Someone has to be warned. They know what I have seen. The servitor nudged a quivering mound of slop with its toe.
Eat.
Don't you see? Can't you understand? Neri's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. We're all in terrible danger. I saw a ship, a great black ship, this ship, and it was being torn apart. But the servitors had turned their back as others vied for attention. They were pleading, as had Neri, for their freedom. They weren't like these others. They insisted. They sounded pathetic. The servitors had few thoughts of their own. Their dull brains were able to retain only simple instructions. It was almost impossible to get through to them, as she knew well by now. In addition to this, oppressively loud and discordant noise is pumped into the holds. Food and drink for the captives are laced with sedatives. The captive population is regularly moved from one hold to another. All of this serves to keep the Psykers in a helpless, confused and compliant state. The most dangerous Psykers, however, are kept in separate isolation cells. With every ship capable of holding thousands of Psykers, not all of them immediately arrive on Holy Terra. There are a series of worlds, kept hidden and well guarded by the Imperium, where the black ships often stop first. Here, tens of thousands of Psykers are processed, graded and prepared for their final journey to Terra. Even besides these worlds, Terra itself still receives dozens of black ships directly to receive their precious cargo. Alright, so that's what it's like to be on a black ship. But what is the process like when you are being captured? What about being transferred between multiple black ships as the fleet parts way before arriving on Terra? Being captured and handed over to the black ships is arguably the most dangerous aspect of the Great Tide. In the particular case of Neri from the Stuff of Nightmares, she would one day be pulled away from her family by the local enforcers. She, along with the other Psykers of her world, were kept in horrible, cold and wet cells, until finally handed over to the black ships. The Adeptus Arbites also often finds itself aiding in the collection of the Great Tide, even if they rarely actually enter a black ship in person. Should anyone resist in the gathering of the Great Tide or in any way try to interfere with it, the entirety of the Imperium's armed forces is ready to enact the Emperor's justice. Although Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Astartes, Arbites and Inquisitors all have intervened on behalf of the black ships, few organizations are truly as terrifying as the Chamber of Judgment from the Sisters of Silence. The tactics and methods of the Chamber of Judgment are extreme. The knowledge of their very existence is often burned alongside abhumans or criminals who colluded with rogue Psykers. Should a Psyker try to flee, they are pursued until killed or finally caught. Silent judges can even order entire blocks or villages burst for concealing their Psykers from the Imperium. The dark reputation of the black ships has only grown into infamy by the unrelenting judgment of these sisters. Many even spread stories of ethereal banshees stealing away children at night with the arrival of the black ships. Or much more gruesome stories. In Master of Mankind, we get to follow Skoya, the first Psyker to ever be sacrificed to the Golden Throne, and there is a lot to take in from her insane story. Skoya was only 17 years old when one night she turned to the sky. The rain and thunder played only the background to the fire and flame from spaceships entering Skoya's homeworld. The girl ran into a nearby forest to hide. Her parents were in tears as the Imperium returned to gather shamans and spirit seekers from every village to be titled. Skoya was honored amongst her people. She could speak with the dead, but this very honor would now turn into a nightmare. The Silent Sisters came. Their beasts were half flesh, half machine hounds. When Skoya is caught, it is the first time ever that the voices of the spirits fall silent. Those who hunt her lacked a soul. When caught, Skoya is brought into the same type of chamber as we saw with Neri. The captured Psykers wept, wailed, and some raged, trying to get out to no avail. Some people remained cheerful in the first couple days, sharing their shared history of ancestral speakers and witch priests. But as days turned to weeks and then months, the situation only grew worse. The cells became crammed with people from different worlds. One man even claimed they were all to become astropaths. They were all fed brown sludge and reprocessed water by servitors. When some sought to brutalize the servitors in defiance, the Sisters of Silence simply entered the cells during the times the Psykers were given their rations. Their presence alone was enough to cripple their captives. One man even approached them, only to collapse and not wake for 3 days. The women were called devils, banshees, husks, or undead. When they landed, the nightmare of Skoya was almost at its end, but there was one final chapter. Skoya opens her eyes. She is bound within her own coffin, bathed in tumultuous sounds. It rises, octave by octave, and she thinks of deep-sea monsters, ship-eating creatures stirring and thrashing upon the lightless ocean beds. She breathes in, managing only a shallow mouthful of air. Her heart beats slowly, so very slowly. She presses her hands to the thickness of the vision panel, knowing instinctively that it isn't for her to see out. It's for her captors to look in, to see her, to see if she's still alive. Her next breath is harder than the first. She had to fight to suck it in, and it scarcely gets past her throat. Already, the edges of her vision darken to grey. She beats her fist against the window, making the coffin sway gently, the motion no different from a rocking cradle. Her third breath barely comes at all. In that moment, she cries out, not with her mouth, but with her mind. She screams for the spirits to come for her. She beseeches them for their aid. She curses them for their silence. Panic drives her past holiness into blasphemy, and she still screams. Other cries join her. Some, like Skoya's, beseech ancestor spirits of the memories of the lost. Others are offered up as desperate prayers to the Emperor, or the false and half-forgotten gods of distant worlds. It is the unified cry of people drawn from hundreds of cultures, voicing their psychic gift in terminal harmony. Not all are pained, some are obliviously joyful, others are sixth sense distillations of helpless rage or simple crude fear. The chorus of outreaching emotions rises, and the battalion of interconnected machines all run louder, harder in sympathetic response. She is fading now, her breaths no longer come, and that only amplifies her silent cry. She slumps forwards, cheeks pressed to the unbreakable glass, her lips trembling, her eyes wide and shivering. The stiller she becomes, the darker her sight falls, the louder she screams inside her own skull. And now, only now, does she hear the melody of the other souls of the 1000 sharing the same fate, suffering what she suffers. Their screams and prayers and panic and fears entwine, unseen by all, and together they form one sound, one impossibly perfect note. Those outside the coffins may yet hear it, but its true purity is unheard by any but the dying souls themselves. It is the very first note in a song that will last 10,000 years, and perhaps beyond. She, Skoya, is its first singer. But what do the people of the Imperium think of the Black Ships? As shown before, the Black Ships are the most feared fleet in the entire Imperium, but their tides are almost universally agreed upon to be as necessary as they are vile. To some parents, the taking of their child is a cruel twist of fate. To others, they begrudgingly accept it to rid their homes of their tainted offspring. This does leave me wondering how the Sisters of Silence feel on the matter. While the Sisters of Silence seem like a monolithic entity, they are anything but. Although their loyalty to the Emperor is absolute and has never faltered, this does not necessarily mean they all agree on the same issues. In the short story The Voice, we even learn that at least one of the Sisters of Silence believes the Emperor is a god already during the Horus Heresy. In that same short story, we also learn that the Sisters of Silence are rather close to their black ships. They almost treat them and some of the Sisters' unique chambers within it as something sacred. With the Imperium changing after the Horus Heresy, so too would the Sisters change. During the War of the Beast, the Sisters of Silence have been seen as holding an even more extreme view of the Imperium than the Custodes. To the Sisters, the Imperium already was a carcass, one that had lost its Emperor, and so they were unwilling to aid the Imperium. The topic of the Sisters of Silence being exiled, returning to the Imperium, only to be pushed to the side again for 10,000 years, is something that deserves its own video, and I will definitely cover it in an upcoming Sisters of Silence deep dive. But for now, I have to add 2 more perspectives in regards to the black ships from the Sisters. Right before the return of Rabute Guilliman, the Sisters of Silence were utterly divided between those still serving the black ships and those who were cast away and became almost renegades to the Imperium. To these renegades who traveled the galaxy, hunting demons and witches, their sisters on the black ships were too strong in their loyalty to the Adeptus Terra and the High Lords. The most interesting perspective on the black ships and the Great Titan 40K comes from the sister Caria. While the Sisters of Silence lack emotion and are brutal in many ways, the reason for their oaths of silence comes from the fact that they are never to give mercy and to keep secret the greatest horrors of the galaxy. With the lack of, or often subdued emotion from being pariahs, most Sisters of Silence don't feel pity or remorse from their actions. But this is where Caria is different. We get to see her laments when the first sacrifice for the Golden Throne arrives on Terra, as seen in Master of Mankind. Caria was the silence at the storm's heart. She watched through the great oculus as another of the Black Fleet made planetfall. There was something beautifully dramatic in how a vessel born within the void caught fire when it sought to land for the very first time. The flames of atmospheric entry served as Terra's welcoming embrace. Another figure joined her up at the viewing platform. Caria didn't need to turn to see who it was. 1,000 innocents, nervously awaiting the soul binding they were falsely promised. 1,000 men, women and children, believing they go now to serve their emperor. Caria gestured. Veronica's clawed hand gestured a swift reply. And serve him they will. Few souls in the entire empire can claim such purity of service. What is this resistance inside you, sister? Have you become so enamored of battle that you believe yourself above our true calling? You are a warden, Caria, not a warrior. For a time, Caria watched the second ship descending, wreathed in atmospheric flame, carrying its living cargo to their service within the Imperial Palace. I am both now, she sighed. Warden and warrior, the war has made us all both. Veronica's expression showed faint distaste. Perhaps so. I will leave you to your contemplation, sister, and wish you well for your own planetfall. Caria knew she should prepare herself soon. Her place was on the third ship. Wait. Veronica waited, her eyes on Caria's own. 1,000 souls. What do the calculations state? How long will they last? The mistress of the Black Fleet lifted her hood back into place, covering her silvering hair. They will burn for 1 day. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Caria to watch the oculus alone. 1,000 souls today, Caria thought. And what of tomorrow? But what if I told you, besides being the Imperium's lifeblood, the black ships are also its greatest weakness, that if exploited, could spell the end of the Imperium? The black ships have changed in the 10,000 years. Some changes are great, some are small. But in the era Indomitus, these fleets are pressed harder than ever. The Imperium is sundered in half by the fall of Cadia and the spread of the Cicatrix Maledictum, and with that, half of the fleets are on the wrong side of the galaxy, their return journey taking longer than ever, or flat out impossible to be completed. If anything, the Imperium's greatest weakness has and always will be the black ships. As we saw in their earlier history, without the Sisters of Silence, the black ships could never have thrived and never completed their objectives. The Imperium knows millions of heroes, from the simple pious soldiers to the living saints and angels of death, but few have gone as unsung as those of the black ships. Without them, the Imperium would have died millennia ago. But should this weakness ever be exploited, the Imperium would know its true doom. Black ships without any interference go missing plenty enough. Even some black ships within the Nidor subsector have come under attack by the kindreds of the Cronus hegemony. Well, at first this might seem like a cause for the Imperium to go on a massive crusade against them. Further investigation revealed a deeper conspiracy. Several planetary governors struggling to pay their tithes due to civil unrest and corruption have resorted to hiring mercenaries. Some black ships have been lost, their crews killed along with the most dangerous Psykers, while the rest are stolen away. Desperation has led to some desperate measures, but this level of corruption and interference with the Great Tide has invoked the wrath of not only the Silent Sisterhood, but also that of the Adeptus Custodes. Neither the governor nor the abhuman mercenary was given mercy. But this is far from the only instance of corruption threatening the Emperor. Some planets always hide their Psykers, some using them for their own dark means. In one sinister instance, a governor hid his psychic daughter, only to be punished with a mind-slaver invasion that consumed his entire world and population in the matter of 3 days. With all this chaos, Rabute Gilliman has started the full reinstatement of the Sisters of Silence. They are patrolling the galaxy in numbers not seen since the Great Crusade, but it should also be stated that some Chaos Space Marines deeply understand the weakness of the Great Tide. They know it can be exploited, and if they get a chance, that might be it for the Imperium. The Black Ships are one of the Imperium's darkest secrets, a tide of souls to feed a dying empire, a necessary evil, something that must be done. But as the Emperor put it, a forbidden protocol. This is the worst case scenario, the relic of a past crime, a scar left to fester for 10,000 years, that slowly over the millennia has gotten worse and worse. In recent lore, it is no longer 1,000 Psykers a day that need to be fed to the Emperor. Instead, it has become 4,000. Estimations put it at 10,000 soon, and after that, it will become unmanageable to keep going. Because, for all their strength, the insane amount of black ships that exist, it will not be enough. It will not be enough to keep fueling Terra, to keep the Astronomicon lit, and to keep the Emperor fed. But if they fail in their task, if even one fleet breaks down in the void and 100,000 Psykers are set free in a sector, not only will the Imperium be starved, but the brutality and psychic backlash unleashed across the Imperium will be impossible to hold back. A tide of mad Psykers that will spread across the worlds, mutating and driving anyone insane who tries to halt them. Only the Sisters of Silence, the Black Ships, the Astra Telepathica, and the Divisio Investigatus stand a chance. But what do you think of all this? Do you think the Black Ships are a fitting solution to the Imperium Psyker issue, or should they do it another way? If you could pilot your own Black Ship, what would you call it? And what planet would you like to tide and explore while you tide them? Let me know all of your thoughts, ideas, concerns, comments and suggestions down in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe if you think I deserved it with this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.